I don't think makeup is bad. I think it's bad when you make it an idol. I think that's when it's a bad thing, when you make it something that is like your all in all. I don't think makeup is demonic, for me anyway. But in saying that, there are some makeup brands and palettes that I stay away from. One, because I believe that names carry power. Like when you look at the Bible, when they name somebody something is important. I brought an eyeshadow palette. There was one color called Jezebel. I said, the who? I said, listen, I will not use it again. And you know, there were other palettes called things like lust and seduction. I said, we not do this today. So, you know, in saying that, you know, being mindful of that, because I believe names carry power. Why would you name something Jezebel unless you know something is up? But equally, you know, there are women of God who wear makeup and are moving in the power of God and them. I think when you look at society, depending on where you live, it changes. So being beautiful, for example, in Ghana, you may not be seen as beautiful in a different nation because the people have kind of constructed amongst themselves what beauty is to them. And so, you know, wherever you go in the world, it will change. But I think looking at the West, since we're in the West, though there are like small differences in what society sees as a beautiful woman, there is still that kind of general, I guess, idea of what is a beautiful woman. Somebody who has long hair, somebody who is of a fair complexion, somebody who I guess is very quiet and kind of has everything going on for them. So even though there are differences, I think in the West, they are kind of promoting that image of a slim woman who is of a fair complexion, predominantly white, since we are in the West anyway. And I guess that's kind of what I've seen with society. But I feel like society doesn't actually know what their standard is for beauty. Because if you look at the movies like 2000s, it was about being slim, very, very slim. And back in the day, somebody would say, oh, your butt's so big. It was an insult. Like in the movies, they'll be offended, like, my butt's so big. Everybody will be angry. But nowadays, if you say that, everybody's cheering, yeah. Like, yeah, my butt's big. It shows you that society is not stable. And so I think that's why it's so important that, you know, we have this discussion, because, you know, for the generation coming up and our current generation, that we don't place our understanding of what is beautiful in what society is currently viewing as beautiful. Because right now it is, you know, people with big curves and things like that. We don't know what's to come in the months or the years ahead. And so if you say, you know what, let me watch the influencers and watch society and see what they are saying, you will always be swayed. You'd never be stable. And so I think society doesn't actually know, because it's always changing depending on, I guess, whatever they want to promote at that time. Yeah.
The other point of view, so what's the Christian, you know, definition of beauty? Which is probably much deeper than the one
I think the Christian point of view of beauty is also, it varies depending who you're asking. Because depending on what denomination you're from, they also have certain standards. In some churches, the women have to wear dresses to their ankles and they're seen as beautiful. Some other places, your hair must always be wrapped, XYZ. So if you're talking about Christians per se, because there are differences amongst the way that I guess we kind of do church and things like that, it kind of forms people's understanding of beauty. But I think regardless of those differences, there should always be a fundamental baseline, and that baseline should always be the Word of God. The Word of God should always be our reference point when it comes to understanding who we are, because it is God that made us. And so if we don't go back to the Word of God to understand how am I seen as beautiful, then we'll always be lost, because you always go back to the maker of a car to know how the car works. And so if I want to understand whether I'm beautiful, I've got to go back to God. And so I think for me, looking at the Christian view, as a basic, we should have that understanding in the Bible. And so I think a few scriptures that I was reflecting on when it comes to how I understand the Christian view of beauty to be, I think all the scriptures point to the fact that it's twofold. It is inward beauty expressed outwardly, but it first starts inwardly. Because if you just focus on the outside, it's hard for it to impact on you on the inside. But if it's an inward thing, it expresses out, and it's so much easier to kind of flow. But on the outside, you can just fake it.